Do we ever consider the defects which have become normalized in our organizations? What are the bad habits or behaviors that we've accepted as the normal way of doing business? My name is Randy Hain, and today in Coach's Corner, we're going to unpack this really interesting topic. Today in the Coach's Corner, I want to talk to you about the need for us to pay attention to the normalization of defects in our organizations. My friend Steve Moore, who's the president of Growing Leaders, turned me on to this concept some time ago. He wrote about how NASA, when they investigated the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger and the Space Shuttle Columbia, identified flaws in both shuttle launches that ended in tragedy. The challenge was that NASA knew about the flaws in the Space Shuttle program, but chose to ignore them or to accept them as just the normal part of the process. That came to be known as the normalization of defects. Now, let's take that thinking and apply it to the business world. Do we ever consider the defects which have become normalized in our businesses? What are the bad habits or behaviors we have accepted as the normal way we do business? I'd like to share 6 of the most common normalized defects that I've observed over my career. Number 1 is the lack of candor. Quite frankly, the lack of candor is pervasive in most of the companies that I work with and know about. We just don't speak the truth to each other. We're not necessarily honest, open, and direct enough. So the lack of candor is a defect that I think is widely accepted. The second one that I've noticed is the lack of accountability. Sometimes it's just difficult for us to hold people accountable. We know we should, but we don't necessarily get the results that we're looking for, and for some reason that is accepted. The third thing that I've observed is lack of time or an addiction to busyness. We have a real busyness addiction problem in business today. Most of the professionals I know, and I've been this person myself, are going from meeting to meeting to meeting with very little time to think strategically and actually execute their jobs. So this lack of time is really an issue that we, again, seem to accept as a normal way of doing business. The fourth observation I've made is that silos are a huge issue. Silos affect collaboration and communication. We work independently and we struggle sometimes to transcend those silos and work in a more collaborative manner. The fifth observation I'd share with you about defects that I've seen is we ignore the necessity of critical feedback. And I'm talking about both giving and receiving. We also need to think about providing a safe environment to give and receive that feedback. But the lack of critical feedback is epidemic across the businesses that I've observed. Finally, the 6th most common that I've observed is the bad behavior of top performers is often ignored. I hear it all the time where John or Susan had a great sales quarter and we're just going to overlook their behavior once again. So bad performance or bad behavior is often ignored if you're a good performer. So what can we do to address this normalization of defects issue in our organizations? I'd like to give you 5, maybe 6 ideas. The first one is we have to be patient. We can't get overwhelmed by the sheer enormity of the defects that we'll find. I've done a workshop for clients before where we brainstorm the defects that we could think of. It never fails to be more than 25, maybe 30. So there are a number of defects that we can quickly spot, but we can't get overwhelmed by the number, and we have to be patient. The second is we have to practice self-reflection. As leaders or would-be leaders, we have to look in the mirror and really think about what part of this do we own? What is in our control? What can we do something about that's, again, within our span of control and influence? The third approach that we could take is obviously asking the team and giving them the freedom to speak openly. Give them a safe space to identify with you in a brainstorming session what these defects are. If they feel that they're free without repercussions, you'll learn a great deal about what the defects are in your organization. The fourth concept, the fourth idea that I think we can bring to bear to address this idea is prioritization. Going back to number one when I said be patient, we have to take this in bite-sized chunks. Let's say that this is a topic that you bring up to your team once a month. Well, out of that list, try to address 1, 2, maybe 3 issues. Don't try to tackle it all at once. You have to prioritize. The fifth idea that I've got for addressing this issue around defects is look for the obvious clues. Dig deeper whenever you hear phrases like, that's the way that we do things around here. Another one is keep that stuff to yourself. The executive team doesn't like to hear negative comments. Another one is, I know what Janet did was wrong, but we can't do without her sales revenue. Those are 3 of the 50 that I could probably give you that are trigger phrases that let you know there's something going on, that we may have accepted a defect. Finally, I guess the 6th point that I would make is it takes courage. We have to be courageous. Identifying and uprooting defects, our own and those in the organization, will not be easy, and there will be resistance. If we fail to show courage and address this critical issue, our teams and organizations will continue to fall short of our potential and possibly even run into disaster. I encourage the dialogue to begin. Let's get started. Good luck.